What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Academy. Today we got another special demo here for you guys today. A special one because Raf came in with very overgrown hair with a big piece of project for me to work with. So you guys are going to be able to see and just the entire process of how I'm going to attack his haircut. We're going to be going with a nice brushback look, something that's a little bit tighter on the sides, keeping a little bit more length and weight in the back. But overall, we're going to be giving him a quite big of a transformation. All right, so before I just jump into this haircut, there's a couple of things I need to break down. First thing being Raf's natural head shape. Second thing being his natural growth pattern. How are we going to allow the hairs to lay in areas it wants to naturally lay in? And then the third thing, obviously, is going to be the visual aspect of this haircut. How are we going to make this haircut look good on Raf, and how is it gonna suit his natural facial structure and things of that area? So first thing is head shape, right? I'll have to read the head shape going from the front. Okay, so all I need to do is place my comb and see where things need to round off. So the apex tends to round off at the top, but most importantly, I want to check the rounding in the corner areas, which is my parietal ridge. So all I'm gonna do is place my comb and just see where it tends to round off. And we notice that there's a quite big dip at the parietal ridge, meaning we're gonna need to keep a little bit of shape in these corners in order to emphasize his head shape, okay? If we just knock out all the weight in these corners, his head shape's gonna look really awkward and it's just gonna be built up into a Christmas tree. What we wanna do is build a little bit of structure in these corners here. Second thing I wanna look at is the shape of his head from the back. More importantly, the shape of the crown and the shape of his nape. Because at the top, the apex is probably gonna round off similar to how it did on the front, because this is where most of the weight is going to be covered in the back. So first things first, I'm going to check the shape of the crown, and luckily enough, Raf has a pretty nice round crown, so we don't have to worry about keeping too much weight in the crown area. Second thing is the shape of the nape. Does his nape like to dip down pretty heavy? Does his nape like to pop out a little bit more? In this case, his nape dips in pretty heavy. Because I'm planning on keeping some of this weight in the back, I need to understand that it's gonna look better to fit the shape of his head and flow it with the natural head shape. So going with something that's a little bit reduced in weight in the crown and reduced in weight in the nape is probably going to give it that nice question mark silhouette, right? So these are things that I need to read before jumping into the haircut. We're gonna move into part 2 of natural growth pattern. Let's look at the most important part of the growth pattern in Raf's hair, which is, in my opinion, the crown area, right? His crown area likes to stick up in different ways. So we notice this one piece here is sticking directly up, but we notice that this side likes to naturally come down and this side wants to naturally come up, okay? So being able to read things like this is gonna allow you to simplify your sectioning process. So all you need to do when you wanna read natural growth pattern is just try pushing the hair in directions where it naturally flows and just see if it naturally wants to go that way. If it doesn't want to lay, for instance, if we pull this area down, it's probably going to react back up. It's not going to come down the way I'm telling it to. It's just going to come down and just bounce back up. Rather than this area, I push it down and it stays. So these are ways we just need to look at the natural growth pattern before jumping into sectioning, because this is going to allow us to really control the weight all throughout the haircut. Last step, this is probably my favorite step when creating haircuts, is the visual process. At the end of the day, we're artists that, create art on people's heads, and we want the haircut to look good on them and we want them to feel confident once they leave our chair. So the first thing that I need to break down is Raf's face shape and his facial structures and how his face looks if he had no hair, right? And how are we gonna add hair on top of his natural facial features to complement it? So the first thing that I personally notice, he has dark, strong facial features, which means something that's too strong in the hairline or something that's too blunt is probably gonna offset the haircut too much and not naturally complement his face shape. So what we want is we want texture, we want movement, and we want softness in the frontal areas to really complement his natural face shape. Second thing I noticed is he has a quite slim face shape, right? So something that's too wide or something that's too narrow is gonna also offset his face shape too much. So because he has a quite slimmer jawline and a narrower face shape, we want something that's sitting more nice and square to really bring out that masculine shape and just bring out that structure within the haircut, right? Right now his hair is round, probably why it's not suiting his facial features the best way it could possibly suit his face. These are the things that I want to break down before just jumping into a haircut. How am I going to naturally make this haircut look good on my client, right? It's not just a sick brush back with a clean taper that's gonna fix all his problems. It's about him looking into the mirror and feeling confident once he leaves my chair. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into this haircut. When I saturate haircuts, I want to saturate it up to 90%. 100 meaning it's soaking wet, like he just jumped out of the shower. But 90 meaning it's like he just jumped out of the shower, but he slightly towel dried his hair. So there's still a little bit of dryness to the hair, but just enough moisture for me to section clean sections throughout the haircut. Okay, so all I'm gonna do is start with sectioning and making sure that his hair is nicely saturated evenly. Alright guys, so we're gonna go ahead and start off our sectioning process here. First section that I'm gonna take is my radial, and it's gonna go directly from my cowlick to behind the ear. So this is gonna separate the back from the front and the sides. So this is literally gonna isolate the crown and the nape area for me so that I can focus on this area as one piece. So all I'm gonna do, slightly bend my comb for maximum tension. My index right at the comb. Okay, we go right at the cowlick. Bring that down all the way into the back of the ear. Okay, we're just gonna separate this up and out of the way. For this next step here, once we have the back isolated, we're gonna go ahead and isolate the apex, which is the top, into the sides. So what I need to read is the round of the head, because this area is gonna be quite important to keep the weight in, right? The transition of weight in the parietal ridge into the crown. So all I'm gonna read is the roundness of the head, and it's always from top, and where it begins to round is where the section starts into the corner of his hairline, because his hairline also is an area that we want to keep a little bit more weight and length in, because once we remove the corners, his corners are going to feel too high and he's just going to feel like he's walking around with a round haircut. So what we're going to do is reading that round, we're going to go from there directly into the corner of his hairline. Okay, we're just gonna isolate the top here with the clip. Same thing on the sides. We're gonna go ahead and isolate the sides here with the clip as well. Okay, we're just gonna isolate the sides here as well. And once we've isolated the apex and the sides, we're gonna repeat the exact same steps we did on the sides here on the other side. So real quick, same thing. It's okay if there's slight unevenness because the cowlick comes in a 360 clockwise direction. So we're just gonna go from the cowlick straight into behind the ear. Once again, same thing, we're not overcomplicating things. Just sticking to the method, okay, pushing everything forward after the crown. And from here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna read the roundness of his head and then just go into the corner of his hairline. Nice and easy, guys. Okay, into the roundness and into the corner. There's always going to be one side that's slightly harder and slightly trickier to section, and clearly for Raf's hair, it's this right side here. You tend to notice his growth patterns are kind of crazier and his hair tends to kind of stick out in these areas a little bit more. So just be mindful of those things, right? But overall, doing the exact same thing we did on both sides. Alright guys, so at this point, I've chose to start in the back. Number one reason being, I feel like the back actually holds a lot of weight right now. In my opinion, it's probably the most problematic area that I want to fix real quick, just so that I get more of a visual understanding of how this entire haircut's gonna come out. So one thing I noticed is I like the length, I don't like the weight. So in this case, we're obviously gonna layer the haircut. So we're gonna go ahead and choose our layering method in the back and keep all the length so we can have a longer finish, but we can have a more of a tighter hold on Raf's haircut. So I'm gonna go ahead, saturate his hair one more time. And we're gonna take a vertical section straight down the middle. Okay, vertical section comes straight down through the head. I'm gonna isolate that. Same thing here, boom. Vertical section comes straight down. That gets isolated as well. We're gonna grab this layer right here. And because I wanna keep a little bit more weight in the crown, but I wanna remove all the weight closer to the occipital bone, I'm gonna choose to go with the square layer. So I'm gonna pull this out, and my choice of length is gonna be set in right there. Reason being, that's the shortest point. This is gonna be the longest point. I'm gonna offset that and create this as my shortest point and make that my longest point. Continue. Cutting into these layers at the bottom here. And we're gonna continue that into the next section. What we're gonna do here is we're gonna create a second section straight through, and we're gonna do something that's gonna emphasize movement and emphasize softness. So in order to do that, we need to go with the horizontally round shape. So this section is gonna be cut directly on base with no over direction left or right, and it's just gonna stay directly where this is using our previous guide. So if you come over here, we're gonna pull, staying on base, checking my guide, changing my body positioning so that I can get a little bit more of a clear view with my over direction, and also just helps out my body positioning in general. I'm just gonna go ahead and finish this layer off. And we're gonna continue round layering this entire area with the square vertical cutting line. As I go into this left side here, slightly pivoting my sections, so for consistency in my layering. Like I said, we're pulling this out, and I want you guys to look at my over direction here. Look at where that section is, guys. It's directly on base. Pull, check your guide. Staying directly on base. Last layer, we're gonna go ahead and finish this layer off. Same technique, just removing all that weight. And everything is just hugging straight to the head. And we have something more of a softer finish, and everything is just kind of cohesive to the styling. Just go ahead and finish off this right panel as well. Okay, finishing off both sides here. Still staying with the nice horizontally round shape and square cutting line. Okay, so we're gonna be pulling, boom, push to check. Okay, finishing off my layering process here. Moving on to the sides, and I'm gonna slightly start pivoting again, because we notice it's slimmer up top and wider down the bottom. So we're gonna start our pivoting process to create consistency within our sections. Same thing here, grab our guide and we push to check, boom. Same thing here, grab the nape, boom. Same thing, finishing this off. Finishing up our very last section here. Boom. Okay, as you guys can see now, the back is finished. Has a lot of movement, has a lot more softness for sure, and it's not as heavy as it was before, and it's just gonna complement his natural head shape now rather than ruining it. All right, so we're gonna move on to the side panel here, and I think something that's very important to understand as we reach the side panel is to only cut once. Okay, what does that mean? And what does it mean to only cut once? So I think the idea is a lot of the times we set up clipper work, we go back to shear work, and then we go back to clipper work, and we just try to find the balance as we do that, right? As I said in my first initial guide, that's the last time we're gonna touch our scissors on the sides. Maybe we can use it to soften it up, but the initial shape of things isn't gonna change. So this choice of length that you set here is quite crucial. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove the clip, and let's just look at this visually. Let's just look at the flow of how things naturally wanna flow. He has good flow, and the movement is definitely there, but the weight here is just too heavy for us to add that taper into, right? Too bulky, and there's just too much weight. So all I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and saturate his hair one more time, and I'm gonna go ahead and set in my initial guide for my taper. All I'm gonna do is set in my guide for my taper. Okay, and we have to imagine where the taper is gonna sit. So most likely taper is gonna sit right here. So my graduated line has to be set in a diagonal line like that as well. So we're gonna go ahead and create a slight diagonal line, staying closer to a vertical because I wanna remove more weight. And all I'm gonna do now is just isolate just this section here. I'm gonna pick that out, and fingers are gonna be knuckles tied to the head, and I'm gonna create a diagonal weight line for my taper to sit. Same thing here. So once that first line is set, I can go through, use that second line, and all I'm gonna do now is over direct everything. And all I'm gonna do now is over direct everything back to previous. Okay, so pull, check my guide. Okay, and everything gets over directed back into my previous. Okay, and as I get to my nape, I'm just keeping the layers slightly longer. Third section comes in, comes down, and this gets over directed back to previous as well. Same thing here, boom. And guys, look at what we have here. We have a disconnection going from short, long piece right there. So all we need to do is blend that line through. Last section comes over and gets blended right in. And now we have a graduated line that's set in perfect for a taper, but also has beautiful flow leading into the back here. Now that we finished both sides, we can go ahead and use 2 checkpoints just to make sure that the length is nice and even. So I'm gonna grab the same piece of hair from 2 areas on the left and right side, and all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull it out and measure it using my comb and its teeth. So we pull and we use it to measure it with the comb. Same thing here, we pull, measuring with our comb. Okay, that way we can ensure that the length is nice and even on both sides, and we can just go ahead and move on to the top. As you guys can notice, right, tends to spike in different directions everywhere. And because we're going for a nice textured look, the last thing that I want to do in this case is to cut it too short and have the cowlicks just stick out everywhere. So what I want to remind myself throughout this process is to keep enough length and make sure that I'm not removing too much in the front, or else his cowlicks are just going to stick up. And I'm going to use my nose as a reference to my midpoint, and I'm just going to go ahead and create a vertical guide straight down the middle. Okay, same thing here. And all I'm gonna do now is just grab the length in the back and see what type of layer it is that we're working with, right? Okay, so we're gonna grab the length in the back, and all we're gonna do is go from that shortest point, and we're just gonna texture it in slightly. Okay, the idea isn't to remove any length, but it's just to refine its texture so that the haircut has a little bit more movement. And as I get to the front, leaving all the lengths nice and long. So we're moving in more of a square line, leaving all the length in the front. Same thing here, over directing everything back to previous, because from the front, I want a square silhouette. So each section from now is gonna get over directed back to previous. It's gonna give me a nice square shape from the front, but it's also gonna give me a nice square shape from the sides as well by over directing everything back to previous. Second section gets picked up, and everything gets back over directed back to previous. Gets picked up one more time, check my guide. And there's just less and less hair that I'm cutting. One more time, section this all out of the way, and boom. Last section here, push everything up top. Okay, just keep pushing. And finish that section off. Okay, we're gonna repeat the exact same step on the other side. Making sure everything is getting over directed back into previous. Okay. Same thing, over directed back into previous, back into previous. And as I reach the last section here, I'm just gonna push everything up top. I'm just gonna finish that section off. Okay, and cut whatever hasn't been cut. All right guys, so right here, when I pick it up, I notice a very heavy disconnection. As I pull it down too, you can just visually notice that there's a big disconnection in this corner right here, leading from the sides into the back. So what I'm gonna do is, because I don't want too much tension, right? I'm first gonna separate it into a section that isolates that disconnection. Okay, so just pull everything down. And without using too much tension, I'm just gonna throw my comb underneath, tap, I'm just gonna point cut into that disconnection and create this soft blend. That way, I don't remove too much of that shape that I previously created. All right guys, once our wet shape is complete, we're gonna go ahead and obviously pre-style, blow dry, and finish up this entire look. But I wanna mention, because he has such thick, coarse hair, we don't wanna use anything that's gonna be too heavy, like a pomade or a dry clay. I'm gonna use Light Elements by Aveda, and we're just gonna grab a little bit. We're just gonna spread it into our hands. So we're just gonna go in and apply this directly onto the hair. So once you're finished applying the pomade, we're gonna press the cowlick with our index, and we're just gonna dry this clockwise, and everything's just gonna be on high. Okay, once that's set in, we're just gonna give this a nice rough blow dry. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start brushing everything back so I can just imagine what the shape is gonna look like. Checking for that shape to really see what it is that I've created. This way I'm able to visualize the process a little bit better. Okay guys, so as you guys can see, there's that weight line that we created from our shoe work. All we're gonna do is add the 3 guard and just go right into that weight line. 3 guard closed, right into that weight line to dissolve everything underneath it. Okay, once that's set in, we're gonna begin our fading process. No guard closed, and we're gonna set in our guideline. We're gonna open that up, and we're just gonna go 1/2 inch above that. Halfway, and knock the line in between. 1 guard goes on, and we're gonna open it up and go another 1/2 inch above. Close that up. 1.5 goes on, and we're gonna open that up, and we're gonna go right up to that weight line. Close that up. Go right underneath it. We're just gonna detail everything. And once I'm at this point, the fade is pretty much complete. I'm just using my corners to really go in and detail everything together. Okay, before I go ahead and detail, I like to set in my outline first. So we're just gonna set in my C cup and the outline behind the ear. We're gonna pull the ear back, and I'm just gonna go in and create a nice hook transition. And for the C cup here, I'm gonna start at the shortest point and just draw it out. Everything gets under, gets removed. And my skin line is gonna go in right underneath that. Okay, and you guys can see that finish is just a lot cleaner once the fade is added in. Here I'm really using my corners just to detail everything. Using my corners and making sure I have a really soft blend for that taper to just really complement this entirety of the look. Same thing on this other side. Once the rough draft of the fade is set in, setting in my outlines. Same thing for the front, starting at the shortest point, leading into my longest. So once this shape is pretty much complete, we're just gonna go ahead and soften up this look a little bit in areas that needs that softness and go ahead and post style everything up together. This area I actually don't want to soften at all because his hair is very dry already, and what I see is that his cowlicks tend to react outwards. So I don't want to go ahead and soften this because he's gonna have uneven lengths and everything is not gonna lay the way I want it to. So the first area that I'm gonna soften is the nape. We notice that there's a lot of weight still in this area, so we're just gonna go in and we're just gonna point cut and slice all that weight out for a softer finish. So we're going in, we're slicing. We're just gonna go in and slice this entire area until it has a silhouette that's just hugging tight to the head without too much weight in that area. So boom, already I like that way better. Now the next area that I want to remove a little bit of weight in is this transition area from the bridal ridge into the crown. So this area too, I'm just gonna go ahead and slice through. Okay, and I'm just gonna remove some of that weight so it can have a smoother transition. Same thing on the other side. Okay, so this area right here, I notice there's a little bit of weight. I'm just gonna slice into that. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab my feather razor and I'm gonna create a nice outline in the back. But I wanna keep the longest point. So this is where I wanna start my square outline. And I'm just gonna set in my choice of length. And I'm gonna softly connect that line through. Same thing here. Connecting that line through. And just finishing off the back panel here. That gives it a little bit more of a cleaner silhouette. And all the hairs that are underneath the neckline, I'm just gonna remove. Okay, we're just gonna go ahead and blade up wrap, finalize this look, pull the skin, and go in the opposite direction so that we can get the crispiest blade work possible. So pull and blade right into that skin line. Same thing on the other side. Pull and hit the blade right to that line. Pull. Alright guys, once the haircut is complete, we're gonna get into post styling. I'm gonna use a little bit of curl boosting cream by Mason's Pomade, just a little bit, dime size once again. And we're just gonna work in this product to get to this final conclusion of how we want this look to be styled. So I'm just gonna add a little bit. And the reason why I chose curl boosting cream is because I want this look to have a very shiny but very textured finish. So curl boosting cream is gonna bring out the natural texture, but also it won't dry out the hair too much. Add that into the hair. As you guys can see, the natural texture is coming out a bit more. Gonna work in just a little bit more of that. Emphasizing his natural texture. And then we're gonna use a little bit of hairspray just to lock things in together and finalize the look of his final product here. Alright, so as you guys can see, the front is our longest point in the haircut now. Our sides are transitioning beautifully into the back. Back is nice and layered so that it can fit the shape of his head, and the sides are nice and tight so that the taper can just fit right in. And on top, there's a lot of movement and texture. And the way we styled it isn't too dry, complementing his natural hair texture, but also adding that slight wet look that he needs in order to keep the hair nice and moisturized. Alright guys, so that concludes our lesson for today. We did a nice brush back with the taper on the sides, leading into something longer in the back. I hope you guys enjoyed this demo, kept it real nice and clean for this haircut, something that's suitable for Raf. This is gonna wrap up today's demo. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.